Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're taking a look at a game of Leela's against Dragon from the Chess.com Computer Chess Championship Rapid Challenger match, and this is game 19. It's a really interesting modern where frankly Dragon does some simply amazing things to keep the balance and find a perpetual in the end after being a lot of material down. Let's have a look how the opening was defined. It was e4 g6, d4 bishop g7, knight c3 d6, and here Leela's given a very nice system against the modern a6 and then f3. Yeah, sort of an anti-dragon setup really. This pawn on f3, very useful to defend the pawn on e4, so there's no question of any real black pressure against the centre, and it just gives white plenty of ideas with h4 to h5, and there's also a great spot on d2 for the queen to give white a future bishop h6 to remove the bishop and weaken the king side if the black king castles there. Yeah, it can be very hard for black, first of all, to create any real counterplay against such a solid centre, and secondly, to know where to put the king. If you go to the king side, that's an easy target for the white pieces. If you leave the king in the centre, then, well, you know, getting any sort of counterplay, breaking open the centre becomes much more risky. And there's always the possibility that white will play a break like e5 in the centre and put the king in danger. So these are very difficult positions for black to handle. So bishop b7 played, h4, very typical, just looking for h5 just to start that attack, and now h6, and now a very interesting move. Yeah, I mean, my intuitive thought would be you know, to castle queenside and you know, keep these pawns where they are. And just you know, stay as far away as possible from black and let black make the effort to come towards you. a4 played, b4, knight c2, and now a5 from black. So normally when white does this, you know, you bring these queenside pawns forward and then you try and hit them with c3. And basically you just try and claim that the fact that black's played a5, you exchange off the b4 pawn, and then white gets the b file and also a nice square on b5 to aim for. So it's normally something quite positional. But in actual fact, Leela, Dragon and Stockfish, they played a move that's a novelty, and I'm not surprised because human players would be very cautious about playing such a move. Stockfish, Leela and Dragon, in their games, they all went for castle queenside. Castle queenside, yeah, just, you know, with the pawn on a4, it does make you nervous as a human player. Simply, I mean, you're going to have to play b3 to defend the pawn on a4 because it'll get attacked by something like queen d7 or knight d7 to b6. You know, b3 is okay. You know, it's stopping anything coming into c4, but it does weaken this long diagonal. So, you know, that kind of makes you nervous. And the other thing is that, okay, the pawn on a4 stops black from advancing. Yeah, that's the really good point about it. On the other hand, it's putting a pawn that's close to the white king closer to the black position. So sacrifices on a4 are definitely possible, and you know, white's going to have to consider those at every moment. So yeah, this is a very risky move. Very interesting, but very risky. Yeah, the previous human game that I found continued g4, knight d7, knight g3, c5, c3. You know, and basically white's just getting ready to develop and really to castle kingside or put the king over to there, and just get a little bit of pressure on the queen side, exploit the square, and otherwise, you know, maybe try and advance a little bit more. You know, that's very natural way for white to play. I'll just show you the continuation of this game just to show you. It went pretty well for white. Takes, knight e2, knight g3, f4, takes, and then castles, and you know, the game sort of continued. I think, did white win that in the end? No, white even lost. That was Punkratov against Dvalishvili, Blitz Tournament 2020. So after castles, e6 is played. It's a sort of a hippopotamus, but well, with these pawns exposed. On the other hand, the fact that these pawns are exposed doesn't so matter so much with the king on c1. And now knight h3 from Leela. In some of my games, actually, in the reverse of this game, Dragon played g4. It's a very similar play to the game, basically. White plays h5 and then f4 just to break open the king's side. Just a slightly different way of playing it. After takes, Leela took on d4 here with the idea of queen d4 e5. But Dragon just ignored Leela, went knight f3 and g5, and this was very, very dangerous indeed for black. Actually, Dragon won this in the end. In my engine games between Dragon and Stockfish, in this position, Stockfish went d5, which is quite interesting as well. e5, c5, breaking open the centre. And now Dragon played a quite unbelievable idea. Again, I just don't think that this would ever occur to me, I have to say. Played the move knight f5. And, well, Dragon and Stockfish had a bit of a themed battle in this. The idea is simply that after takes, I mean, I was looking at, thinking, am I going crazy here? I don't see any win for white after knight takes f5. I mean, that really is true. The idea is simply bishop h3 and rook g1, and with all of this pressure against the black position and e6 coming in as well, basically, Dragon's just saying, yeah, this is long term just too much for black to handle. But I mean, it's incredible, right? Just putting a piece on crease like that. Stockfish managed to survive. Played bishop c8, just gave back the piece, and then came over like this to try and block. It was quite difficult for black still, but Stockfish survived, as it always seems to. So some very interesting stuff there. Actually, what Leela did was pretty similar. Just a slightly different development of the knights, and not a bad one really. Leela went knight h3. Knight d7, knight f2, so it's actually keeping this knight on e2 to cover the queen side, cover the center. This knight's going to protect e4, and that's going to allow white to advance the king side pawns. It's just, I think, a different emphasis, a slightly different approach for developing the pieces, but basically pretty much equivalent. So after knight b6, b3, knight e7 from Dragon, just getting all the pieces developed. G4. Queen d7, and Queen d7 is actually a multi-purpose move. Black's looking to get the king out of the centre onto the queen side, which looks approximately the safest place. But of course, there's also the idea of knight takes a4, and this is what I was saying earlier, that it's quite a bit of cognitive load on the human player, that at every step of the way, with everything that you do, you've got to consider, is knight takes a4 dangerous? It's why I kind of wouldn't like playing this sort of line as white, really, unless I was really, really going for it completely. But after h5, well, I mean, actually, the engines were never playing knight takes a4, so I kept on suggesting it. And actually, it did not seem to be so bad. Knight a4 was played, and then actually both Stockfish and Dragon didn't want to take the piece, but just wanted to take on g6 first. Just opening up lines. Actually, basically, they just want to ignore that piece and just break through on the king side themselves. So knight c3 takes, queen c3, a4, g5, h5, g6 check, give away that pawn, open the g file, b4, trying to keep things closed, c5, Dragon opening it up. This is one of my games, Stockfish against Dragon. Knight h3. Just looking to exploit that square. We're going to get bishop h3 or bishop c4 and attack the e6 pawn. Rook hc8, b takes c5, a3. Totally bananas, this game. Knight g5, king e8, bishop c4, a2. King b2, d takes c5. King a1. Very nice idea from Dragon there. Just hiding the king in front of the pawn. Knight f8, defending e6, and I mean, I couldn't tell you what this position should be assessed. I would assume that the white would be completely winning, but actually it seemed to be more or less drawn. There's just all sorts of tactics taking place. Bishop g7 allows queen takes d1 check. So bishop d5 from white just to block there, and then this was actually agreed drawn between Stockfish and Dragon, and the idea was after bishop d5. Stockfish wanted to go here, and after here queen c3, well, eventually we get to a position where the queens are exchanged, and we're going to somehow stagger off to an endgame where all the pawns get exchanged. But well, I mean, you can see that knight takes a4, not an engine made move by any means, but still very, very dangerous, and actually not at all bad for black. After g5, that's a natural move, f4 from Leela. So again, it's this same break that we saw earlier. You're just breaking open the king side, and you're just going to try and break through and just push the h-pawn and get at this bishop on g7. Again, after knight takes a4, the engines don't want to take on a4 directly, just want to take off, and play like this. And well, this is a little bit more tricky for black. This is quite a nice little idea. Just get the rook out of the way, hide the bishop on a7, and then keep on attacking. And well, I don't know. I mean, white picks up the exchange here because yeah, this rook is trapped. But yeah, black's got this long diagonal. You've got pieces. You've got open files. The king's stuck on here. There's compensation there, and well, the engines managed to make some sort of compensation. But yeah, I mean, in principle, white's quite a bit better there. So after g takes f4, bishop f4. Again, knight takes a4. That's what I wanted to do. And here the engines were taking and playing king b1. We get in b3. Takes, check, knight c6. I mean, this is the sort of position where basically the engines are saying, well, I've got a couple of pawns and some stuff is loose, so maybe I can generate enough counterplay. I mean, this was heading for draws from this position, but again, it's again, this is really something that engines will hold rather than human players, really. But I think it just shows, the immense dynamism that black's got. But Dragon just played the move castles here, and now there's quite a split here, because I think Leela's next move was really a Leela special, and the engines were like Stockfish and Komodo. They all wanted to play a quick g5, and this is quite a nice idea, really. I mean, after takes, what white wants to do is just to play h6 and drive this bishop away from the long diagonal, make it passive, and well, you're sort of saying then that well, my position should just be fine there. The engines were doing stuff in all sorts of different ways. I quite like Dragon's way of doing it, to be honest, which was to go rook h7, and after h6 to go bishop h8, and well, then, as we'll see in the game, black has ideas like f5, rook g8 with counterplay. This rook's a bit awkward, but it didn't really seem to matter. This seemed to be going, quite decently for black. Leela's plan was quite interesting. Leela played a rook g1 here, and after king b8, the idea was to go g5 here. By the way, stuff like knight takes a4 now is much less dangerous when black's put the king on the queen side here. I mean, without a rook, helping to push the a pawn, or to come to the b file and maybe push a b pawn, white's going to be much safer here. It's not like black's got a lot of pieces attacking. So rook g1 played, king b8, and now g5 from Leela. And the incredible idea is, after takes, you're not going to take with a bishop, you're taking with a rook. And certainly when I saw this, I thought, wow, this is just terrible for black. Just a fork of the bishop on g7 and the pawn on a5. We're taking on a5, and then b4 is hanging. I mean, I actually really thought, playing through it. I mean, obviously I can see that Leela and Dragon drew, but I'm just thinking, but this is awful. I mean, how is this happening? And certainly Dragon's next move, bishop f8, didn't really reassure me, because you just think, well, yeah, okay, bishop f8, the bishop's just been chased away from this long diagonal, passive now. And now I just take on a5, and b4 is hanging as well. What is this? But yeah, I mean, Dragon has just found, just foreseen some absolutely incredible counterplay here. And the move is f5 here. And the first thing that you realise, once you calm down a little bit, is that moves like queen b4 just allow knight c6, forking these two. So actually, tactically, black's queen side is not collapsing yet. And what black's idea here, well, there's two ideas. First of all, with f5, you're cutting off the protection of the pawn on h5. So I mean, rook h5 is actually possible. The second thing is that black's just going to try and get rid of this pawn on e4, and then the knight comes to d5. That's a really great square, lovely outpost. Pawn on b4 sort of ties down the c pawn, so you can't drive it away with c4, and the knight on d5 of course protects the pawn on b4 and also kind of shuts out this rook on a5. So somehow this guy, I mean, maybe it's attacking, maybe it's doing something against the black king, or maybe it's just a weakness cut off from the rest of the board, and black's going to be able to get lots of counterplay. So very, very sharp position. But I mean, just in terms of visualizing that black can play bishop f8, lose a crucial a pawn, with white's rook active there, with another pawn attacked, and then just play f5 and just say, okay, I've got loads of counterplay. I mean, that is, yeah, I mean, that goes quite a bit beyond what I can do really. So e takes f5 play, and this is another incredible line, just knight takes d5. So we're not, black's not bothering at all about the pawns at all, just knight d5, that's the move. And yeah, defending b4, attacking f4, which is also quite awkward, and attacking c3, possibly shutting out this rook on a5. So now, yeah, things keep on getting amazing, because after bishop g5, just getting out of that attack, attacking the rook on d8, black ignores it, of course, plays rook takes h5. Out of nowhere, bishop takes d8 allows bishop h6. That always works in blitz games. And the queen is pinned to the king. So, but knight g3 is possible. And now rook h2 from black. And this is quite amazing as well, really. I mean, you'd expect something like rook takes g5 in this position, to be honest. But rook h2 is really putting it, because after takes, Dragon plays queen takes and just gives away this rook on d8. So black's, like one pawn down and now a whole rook down. But black does have a way of getting back material. Bishop h6, bishop g5. Phew! We're not getting our queen pinned to the white king. But now black can take and go rook takes f2. This is a really interesting position, actually. I mean, it's not at all obvious to me that for them to sacrifice material, which is a pawn and the exchange, that the black should have any reason to think that it's got sufficient compensation. Because after all, what I'm always nervous about is the black king. I mean, this rook is stopping, not giving black any escape square here. And we've got ideas like checking when, well, one of these pieces will have to retreat, either the knight or the bishop. So that really feels like there's threats against the black king, and also there's a way of taking away pieces from any sort of attack against the white king. However, there's a couple of things, and clearly these seem to be enough to give compensation. But again, I wouldn't particularly know it. I wouldn't be able to guess this very easily at all. If I was black in this position, I'd be in full swindle mode, whereas the engines are in full, it's a draw mode. Knight c3 is one big idea. So this knight's coming in. All sorts of sacrificial, perpetual check ideas. I mean, once you go knight c3, you're threatening something like queen b3, cb, knight a2 check, with perpetual there. So there are quite big threats. Also, hitting the rook on d1. There's some threats of taking on a4 as well. So that's obviously quite nasty. The other thing is that well, black's got this big pressure along the 7th rank, and white's knight is on g3, doesn't look particularly useful, a little bit loose as well, but actually it's performing the very valuable task of stopping anything coming into e4, and combining with the rook and attacking c2. And the fact that this knight kind of has to stay on g3, but is also quite loose and vulnerable to attack, is kind of what seems to make black's position possible, because it's not very easy for white to bring really a big amount of guns against the black king. It's but yeah, you really do feel that a couple of things might be changed in the position, and then all of a sudden white's completely winning. It's really on the absolute edge, I think, for black. So after king b2, we go knight c3. And then rook a1 was played, just protecting the pawn on a4. So this rook then might be able to move away without allowing a nasty knight takes a4 check. I mean, rook c1 is similar, but there it defends the pawn on c2 more, but it keeps the rook tied down to here. Both seem to be all right for black in judging from my engine games. So after rook a1, knight c8 played, and again this is just completely bananas, really. I mean, you're exchanging a pawn down. You should be getting at that king right, but actually you're just retreating a piece. And the idea actually is that black's kind of waiting or looking to start hitting this knight with rook and queen. But just wants to be out of the way of any checks, basically. So this knight is just stopping any checks, not giving white that opportunity, and then black's going to be ready to attack. So a lot of moves for white here. I mean, if you go something like bishop d3, simply queen h3 is the move that you have to see, and black's idea is just to go rook g2. So for example, if white takes the opportunity to reactivate the rook with rook f5, we go rook g2 here, bishop f1, queen g3, takes, and these positions with three pieces against the two rooks were turning out fine for black. Well, you can get the bishop back, you can sort of hold with a knight on d5, which holds all the points. Still feels very fraught to me, I have to say, but the engines were holding that absolutely fine. If you go something like bishop c4, queen h3 again, bishop d3, important to cover the c2 square, and then this was what the engines were doing: rook f3, knight f1, and then queen h8, hitting that pawn on d4, which is quite amazing. And after queen g4, knight e4, just blocking, bishop takes e4, we've got queen d4 check, and then this move, rook takes b3. I mean, amazing tactics, yeah. And the idea is that if cb3 we go queen f2, and king b1 we go queen f1, and we just keep on checking you all over the houses. Again, I wouldn't be 100% confident or convinced that that this would be a draw, but a draw it turns out to be. So bishop a6 played, which looked incredibly natural. After all, if you can swap off this light square bishop, then the black king's exposed, open to checks. But one of the lovely points of playing knight c3 is that this bishop can come into e4, and now we're actually attacking the pawn on c2. So white defends it with rook c1. And now the amazing thing is that black can already sacrifice with bishop c2. So we've got a real threat here. Queen b3 check is coming in. So rook c2, and now queen e1. And here we're really seeing the power of this knight on c3. I mean, I think probably that's one thing that I'll take away from this game, is that a knight established on c3 with a white king on the queen side, really solidly, supported by an outpost like that, is really worth a huge amount, because the amount of tactics and mating ideas that are in there just because of that piece is quite incredible, and that's allowing black to maintain the balance despite being loads of material down. Well, rook b5 played was played by Leela, just hoping that the black will get tempted, but Leela not. King a7. I mean, quite amazing, really. Rook b7 check. You've got all sorts of ideas. I mean, actually, even stuff like king a6. You'd sort of say, oh, queen b5 check, not possible, because this knight is even, performing some defensive duties for the black king. It's really quite amazing. So white had to play the move queen c1. The only way basically to stop black from playing queen b1 checkmate. And now takes, and queen g3. And well, that knight has finally gone. That's enabling black to keep some sort of material balance there. And of course the knight on c3 is still there, and we still got lots of checks. And bishop c8 played. White's a whole rook up here. But after queen g2, queen d2, queen e4, it turns out that black just cannot white cannot avoid perpetual, and it's quite amazing, really. Because you've got you've got a queen alongside. You would have thought surely this is going to be a draw, and the white king can try and escape in all sorts of ways. King c1, knight a2 check, king d1, knight c3, king e1, but we just go queen g1. If you go queen f1, then queen e3 check is even winning, and you go king d2, I can just check you back. check you. Now I can give another check there. Got a little bit closer. That's just completely drawn, because if king a1, there's queen a2, checkmate. I found this, a completely amazing game by Dragon. I was really, it's really the ultimate spirit of the modern, really. Just giving up material like that, and then finding counterplay. I mean, I'm still kind of, can this really be true that Black could sacrifice, exchange a pawn, get the pieces active, and then play a quiet waiting move like knight c8, just waiting for White to do something, and you're basically saying, White, you can't do anything at all. It is quite amazing. But again, I think really shows power of the knight on c3. Combined with a rook on the 7th like that, and major pieces that could come to the 8th rank. I think that just shows what an awesome type of piece that is, and that it's worth it's worth a hell of a lot of compensation somehow. But I mean, what I also found amazing was this whole play, because this idea of Leela's I thought was fantastic. Rook g1 takes g5, forking the 2. I could easily have missed that with Black, but the idea that you can just find counterplay by retreating the bishop to its starting square, and then f5, is just amazing as well. Just incredible vision there, just to understand how strong a knight, an invulnerable knight on d5, supported by another knight, so can't even be destroyed by single white pieces, linking together with that pawn on b4 and the weak square on c3 on the queen side. How strong and how much that's worth. It's worth multiple pawns, worth an exchange in the end, and a pawn as well in the end. Really quite incredible there, I mean, what I also liked, was this was somehow a move that to human players seems so strange, castling when you've moved a pawn in front, and all of the engines want to do it. They all think that's absolutely fine. But you do often see, I mean, this orthodoxy is often that you shouldn't move pawns in front of your castle position. But there's one fantastic game in Silicon Road, I think the first game in the book actually, where Leela defends by moving its castle on the queen side and the king's Indian, and it defends by moving its pawns to like b4 and a5, and you really think this is totally crazy. But sometimes the thing you've got to worry about the most is a Black pawn advance, a5 to a4 here, b3, a3, and moving the pawns forward just stops them. Makes them more vulnerable to piece sacrifices, of course, but a piece sacrifice that costs more material for Black, so also means Black's got less material available to attack with afterwards. It's always the best thing to do, if you can attack with pawns, sacrifice pawns, and keep as many pieces as possible to do the second wave of attack. If you're sacrificing pieces from the start, well, you've got fewer pieces for the second wave of attack afterwards. But really, amazing game, and great stuff from Dragon there. In the end, Leela prevailed, I think +10 or something like that, some sort of score like that. So pretty close match. But some very, very interesting games, and I've got a little list of ones that I really like, so I'll be dipping into those from time to time as well. There we are. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoyed that, then do maybe give a like, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new book, The Silicon Road, Re-Engineering the Chess Classics. That's a new one. Just come out. Just received my author's copies today, and it looks gorgeous. And I've read a few chapters again, and I still think it's really, really good. So that's normally a good sign. Normally quite critical of stuff I do, but I think it's really brilliant. So do take a look at that. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and keep peeled because we've got lots more videos coming. Thanks for watching.